You have so much success, and you hit a lot of success at an early age. At 16, you had these three iconic and epic films already in the pipeline, right? And I see everyone commenting on those films, which are, of course, are 16 Candles, A Breakfast Club, and Pretty in Pink. So for you, how did these opportunities and this trio of movies come up for you?
Well, I was actually 15 when I did 16 Candles. And then I was 16 when I did Breakfast Club. And then I did Pretty in Pink when I was 18.
Okay.
So they came about basically because John Hughes wrote, well, first he wrote Breakfast Club, and he was going to shoot it. It was going to be his first movie as a director, writer-director, and it was going to be done in Chicago. And then over 4th of July weekend, I mean, this is what he told me. Over 4th of July weekend, he wrote 16 Candles with my picture. He hadn't met me yet, but it was in like a stack of headshots or something. And he put it above his workstation and wrote it in 2 days. And then he sent it to the studio, and they said, oh, we want to do that first. And so he wanted to meet me. When they said, oh, who's going to be the girl? He's like, well, what about the girl that I wrote it about? And we met, and we totally hit it off. And then at the end of 16 Candles, he asked me and Anthony Michael Hall to be in The Breakfast Club. So that's kind of how that happened. And then he wrote Pretty in Pink for me. I mean, he wrote that after he knew me. Yeah. I think that, you know, I think it did happen really fast, and I think it was a little bit overwhelming. I had a very protective family, and so I feel like they did everything they could to sort of shield me from it. You know, I wasn't really big in going out to clubs or, you know, any of that. Like, I feel like I was very self-protective. Sometimes I felt a little frustrated by that. You know, there were certain things that I wanted to do or I was interested in that my mom just vetoed because she didn't want me to do something on screen that I hadn't really experienced in life yet. And I was frustrated by that as a teenager, but now looking back as a mother, I'm sort of grateful for that because I feel like it sort of prepared me for the long haul. So it was kind of exciting. I feel like sometimes if I look back on it, I kind of wish that I would have sort of not stressed as much. You know, I feel like I would have, you know, if I could have looked at, you're going to be fine. You're going to be happy. You're going to be married. You're going to have kids. You're going to still have a career. You're going to do all kinds of things. I feel like if I would have had some assurance of that, or if I would have learned meditation earlier, you know, I would have probably been happier as a teenager. But, you know, it was fine. It was exciting, you know.
Did you have any inclination when you were doing these films that they were going to be so iconic and legendary? Were you kind of like just going through the motions of work and it was a job and you'll see what happens? Or did you know? Did you feel it?
No, of course not. I mean, I had no idea that they would be considered classic movies. I knew that I liked them. I mean, I knew that when I read 16 Candles, it made me laugh in a way that nothing else that I read made me laugh. And I felt like Breakfast Club was, I thought it was a brilliant screenplay. So you know, when you love something so much, you feel like, okay, it's going to find a certain audience. Maybe not everyone's going to get it because you always think that like, you know about cool stuff before anyone else does. And you kind of almost like I'm the kind of person, my older daughter, Matilda's the same way. It's like when we really like something, we almost don't want other people to like it. Because then it's like, I don't know, it's not like our special little thing. So I really thought that Breakfast Club was going to find its like little niche audience. I had no idea it was going to, you know, have the impact that it did. And then I thought Pretty in Pink, I was sure that was going to be a bomb. Like I even told I even told Howie Deutsch, who's Zoe Deutsch's dad. I think he's known as Zoe Deutsch's dad now, but at the time I was like, you know, this is going to totally bomb. You know, the other movie, you know, Breakfast Club did so well, like everyone's going to hate this movie. And he's like, I don't know. I don't think so. But I was absolutely sure, even though I liked it, I thought it was going to bomb. But, you know, I of course had no idea that it was going to, we would still be talking about it today.
Do you remember having a moment, was there a certain moment where you did realize the impact these films had made afterwards?
Well, I can remember, okay, so after I did these movies, I moved to Paris because I feel like in a certain way, I mean, I wasn't aware of this at the time, but I feel like I needed to go somewhere where I wasn't known and kind of like make mistakes and, you know, and sort of struggle a little bit and just kind of not be in the public eye. And so that's what I did. But then I would come back to New York, and I remember thinking, like, when I would meet people younger than me, I was in my 20s, right? And I already felt like I was like old because I was in my 20s. But I would talk to people that were like in their early 20s, and I would think like, oh, they're not going to know those movies at all. And they felt like those movies were their generation. And I would think like, well, wait a minute. You were in grade school when these movies came out, you know? And that's when I started to think like, oh, this is interesting. So they're still speaking to a generation. And then that kept happening like generation after generation. So then at a certain point, you're just like, okay, well, these movies speak to people. And I think there's nothing else quite that's been like them. Even though everyone says, you know, oh, we should remake Breakfast Club, or we should do, you know, I feel like Breakfast Club was very much of its time, and it's totally flawed, but wonderful. And it still speaks to people. And, you know, I ended up writing a piece for the New Yorker about it because I have really complicated feelings about it. I love it. There's certain things that I don't love about it. But ultimately, I'm still really proud of it, and I'm really happy that I was a part of it.
Yeah, for sure. And I want to talk a little bit more about that too in a second. But before we dive into that, what were some of your favorite memories from that period of your life? Did you have any sort of memorable, like, pinch me moments that you just will never forget?
Let me think. This is going to sound really snobby, and probably won't. Like, my family teases me about this because my daughter says, like, I'm totally flexing about something that, like, nobody even knows or cares about. But when I was 20 years old, I was doing a movie in London, and it was based on a Graham Greene novel, you know, the novelist. And he was still alive and living in Antibes. And so me, the director, and the producer drove to Antibes and had dinner with Graham Greene. And it was one of those moments, like, at the time I loved, and he wrote End of the Affair. You know, he's just this like legendary writer. And like, even at that time, I just thought it was incredible that I got to have dinner with him and talk to him about his book. So that was like, for me, that was a major moment. And then meeting Bob Dylan was
That's
really
epic.
huge. Yeah, that was amazing. So I think those were moments where I thought I wouldn't be able to do this if I didn't have some notoriety or, you know, whatever. But I'm trying to think. I mean, I feel like just doing those, like, I loved working with John Hughes. I loved doing the Breakfast Club. Like, 16 Candles was the most fun I've ever had doing a movie like, probably ever in my life, you know.
Yeah.
Just the whole thing. It was just really fun.
Did you take anything from those movies, from the set, and favorite 80s style from the movies?
I did keep all of my clothes from Pretty in Pink, except for the prom dress, which I would love to have now because it was just such a weird dress. And like, nobody could look good in that dress. I mean, I think I looked pretty good, you know, considering, but like, that was a really hard dress to wear. It was not at all what I had envisioned in my head. So I didn't like it, and now I wish I had kept it, but I kept all of everything else. But I don't know, I've moved so many times that, you know, I think it's everything is probably in a box somewhere in storage.
Yeah, for sure. Great fashion, by the way. I mean, and never say it won't come back. You never know. That
Oh,
prom
I
dress.
know. Yeah, that's true. That's true. I mean, if you look at like Rachel Comey, and like, actually the puff sleeves are really big right now. And yeah, it's true.
That's awesome. And you mentioned that article you wrote, which I want to talk about for a minute, in the New Yorker. It's a brilliant article. You guys, if you haven't read it, Google it. It's a really, really good piece. And, you know, I'm summarizing right now because it's, you know, a lengthy article. But basically, one of the gists of it was you were saying when those movies were filmed, it was a different time. And some of the things that happened in those films wouldn't necessarily be appropriate to happen today or should have happened then, without taking anything away from the films, of course. It was a really well done piece. So why was it important for you to put this out, and what did that mean for you to do that?
Well, it had been something that was sort of rolling around in my head a lot. And I feel like it really sort of crystallized when I showed The Breakfast Club to my well, then she was 10 years old, and now she's 16 years old. So we did a piece for This American Life, which is a podcast, or, radio show podcast. And I was really nervous about showing her the film because it was really sort of, meaningful and precious to me. But she really wanted to see it because all of her friends had seen it. And so we made a date, and everyone left the house, and it was just her and me. And it was a really powerful experience. I mean, what she got out of it, and what we got out of it together was really powerful. But there were moments in it where I was cringing, thinking, how am I going to explain this? Like when John Bender grabs my character under the table, like the sort of vitriol that he spews because he feels rejected by me. All of that stuff was, it was commonplace. Like I at the time I was, and my mother was kind of upset about even though that wasn't actually my crotch that was featured in the movie, it was somebody else. Like, just the idea that would happen was upsetting at the time, and we tried to get John to, change it, but he wouldn't. Although he did change certain things that I didn't like or feel comfortable with. But all of that stuff with Bender and insulting my character, like that was almost considered attractive at the time.
Right.
And yet when you have a kid, a girl, like, that's the last thing you want, is for them to think that that's how they should be treated in life. And so it started to sort of, I started to think about it, and then it wasn't until Me Too happened, and I wrote one article for the New Yorker, and then I wrote the Breakfast Club piece. But I think it was at that moment, I don't know, it was just kind of like, it was almost like me thinking aloud, but I worked really hard on it. It took months, and it was really important to me also that people understood that I wasn't condemning the movie. That I still feel like it has incredible value. The fact that it tells teenagers that their voices matter. I mean, that matters to me more than anything right now, because the young generation, as far as I'm concerned, is going to save us. And it's really important that every teenager understands that their voice matters, and what they want and the kind of world that they want to live in matters. And I feel like that is the overall message of the Breakfast Club that I take away, and that's why I still feel like it has a lot of value. But that's pretty much the genesis of how I came to write the piece.
And I want to talk about Paris for a second. You mentioned that earlier, and I know that after these films, you kind of left Hollywood for a bit, moved to Paris. And that's something I think is so damn cool, because it's hard for people when they have such a taste of success to suddenly be like, I'm going to step away for a hot minute and focus on me, and a little bit of self-care. So what was going through your mind at that point of your life, and what was that chapter in Paris like?
I feel like when I moved to Paris, like I said, it wasn't really anything that was premeditated. I am somebody that relies on my instincts a lot. And generally, I feel like I have pretty good instincts. Not to say that I don't listen to people around me, but I feel like there was something in me when I went to Paris to do a movie with Patrick Dempsey. And we were only supposed to be there for the summer. And there was just something there that I thought, I'm really happy here. And I haven't been happy in Hollywood for a while. Like, I haven't been inspired by the kind of parts that were being offered to me. I was living in a house that was absolutely beautiful, but it was decorated by someone else and didn't really represent my style. I just felt like this is not me, and I need to find out who I am. And so I just decided to sort of hold on to that and stay. And I didn't know, at the time, I remember I called my agent, and I called friends, and everyone was like, oh, okay, I'll see you in a couple months. Everyone was like, because I said I'm moving to Paris, and nobody believed me except for my mother, who burst into tears on the phone because she knew I meant it, And I really thought that I was going to, well, I didn't know if it was going to be forever, but it ended up being like a big chapter of my life, I think, and then I met someone and, had a relationship and, I did a movie there and, than anything, I feel like, that was before we had cell phones. That was before we brought our computer anywhere. Like the internet was really just starting. So, you were able to just go out and get lost and find your way back. And it wasn't that big of a deal. Like, we used maps or, the phone booths or, I learned to use the metro system really well. So I always knew what my metro stop was near my apartment. So I was lost and find my way back. And it was just kind of, it was really, really special for me. And I don't regret at all that I did it. I mean, I won't say that it was the best thing for my American career, but I think in the long term, in terms of the kind of life that I wanted to have, it was invaluable. And, I translate books now into, from French into English. I'm working on my second book right now, and I never would have been able to do that. I mean, never, because I wouldn't have understood this culture, because translation is really more than just anybody can go into Google Translate, but it's about understanding the culture and why they say things a certain way. And I never would have been able to do that if I hadn't had that experience. And for me, that's the kind of life that I want to have, where I do all of these things that keep my brain engaged.
And you have had a level of success and a phenomenal career post-Paris. I see so many people talking about all the shows you've done. Riverdale keeps coming up as a fan favorite. I know the following for that show is amazing, and people love you on Riverdale so much.
Thank you.
A lot of questions about your time on Riverdale and how you are enjoying it.
I am enjoying it. I was supposed to do 3 more episodes this season, and then everything shut down, but we're just sort of waiting for the go-ahead to go back. And I think we will go back, but everyone is sort of figuring out still how that's going to happen.
Right.
It's been great. It's been a really great experience. I mean, it was really sad because, Luke and I played a couple, we played Archie's parents, and he was a really amazing guy. And nobody expected that to happen. And so it I think it's been really difficult. We've all been processing that still. But it's been a really amazing experience.